Hi, Cancer. This reading already feels incredibly emotional, and honestly, I don't think this person has been able to find peace for quite some time. Okay, there is someone here who keeps replaying the past over and over again. I feel like they thought they could walk away from these feelings, distract themselves, keep moving forward, but it hasn't worked. If anything, the silence has only made everything louder. This person misses you more than they let anyone know. They miss your presence, your energy, the way you understood them, and even the little things they once took for granted. What keeps coming through is regret, not just sadness, but the realization that some of the pain you're carrying may have come from choices they made. And honestly, that's becoming harder and harder for them to ignore. Every time they try to push these thoughts away, something brings them right back to you. A memory, a song, a familiar feeling. It's like their heart keeps returning to the same place no matter how far they try to run from it. And that's why this feels like such an important turning point. Because for the first time, I don't feel like they're running from what happened. I feel like they're finally starting to face it. Because for the first time, I don't feel like they're running from what happened. I feel like they're finally starting to face it. And honestly, Cancer, that's where this energy becomes really emotional. Because the moment someone stops running, they start remembering. I keep seeing this person being pulled back into memories they thought they had already packed away. Little moments, ordinary moments. The kind of moments that didn't seem important at the time but somehow mean everything now. A conversation, a laugh, the way you looked at them when nobody else was paying attention, the way you understood something they never had to explain. And it's strange because I don't feel like these memories are arriving when they're expecting them. They seem to appear out of nowhere. They could be busy with work, driving somewhere, standing in line, talking to somebody else. And suddenly it's like their mind drifts back to you. Not because they're trying to think about you, because they can't stop thinking about you. The moon keeps showing up around this energy, and what I'm feeling isn't clarity. It's emotion, deep emotion. The kind that sits underneath the surface for a long time until one day it refuses to stay hidden anymore. For so long, this person tried to convince themselves that they were okay, that they could move on. That enough time would eventually make everything feel smaller, but instead, it feels like the opposite happened. The distance gave them more room to hear their own heart, and their heart keeps bringing them back to the same place. Back to you. Back to what happened. Back to the things they wish they had handled differently. Okay, and this is where it gets heavy, because I don't think they're only missing you. I think they're missing the version of themselves that existed when they were close to you. The Six of Cups feels incredibly strong here. It's almost like they keep revisiting old chapters in their mind, searching for something, searching for the exact moment everything started to slip away, trying to understand why they didn't appreciate what was right in front of them, trying to understand why fear felt easier than vulnerability, why silence felt safer than honesty. And the more they replay it, the harder it becomes to ignore what they've lost. You know, sometimes regret isn't loud. Sometimes regret looks like staring at a ceiling at 2 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes regret looks like reading old messages and wishing you could step back into a single moment and choose differently. Sometimes regret sounds like a person having imaginary conversations that never happened. And honestly, I think they've been doing that a lot, saying things they never said, answering questions you never got the chance to ask, explaining themselves to a version of you that only exists inside their memory. The Nine of Swords energy feels exhausting, not dramatic, not chaotic, just exhausting. Like someone carrying a weight they never put down. Because every time they try to rest, their mind starts moving again. Every mistake, every missed opportunity, every moment they disappointed themselves, it all comes rushing back. And I don't think what hurts them most is losing control. I think what hurts them most is realizing how much love was sitting in front of them while they were distracted by everything else. There is a difference between missing someone and understanding their value. This person feels like they're crossing that line. And that's why the emotions are becoming harder to manage. Because this isn't nostalgia anymore. This isn't simply looking back at the good times. This is somebody beginning to realize that the connection they keep remembering wasn't nearly as easy to replace as they once thought. And the deeper they sit with that realization, the more uncomfortable the truth becomes. Because there is one memory that keeps returning. One moment, one decision, one thing they said or failed to say. And every time it comes back, I hear the same question echoing through their thoughts. What if that was the moment everything changed? Because the deeper they sit with that question, the harder it becomes to look away from the truth. And honestly, I think that's exactly what's happening here. Something has shifted, not outside of them, inside of them. For a long time, this person could explain away what happened. They could blame timing. They could blame stress. They could blame confusion. They could point at circumstances and tell themselves that things simply fell apart because life got complicated. But that story isn't working anymore. The judgment energy feels almost uncomfortable because it's forcing them to revisit everything with a different set of eyes. Not the eyes they had back then, the eyes they have now. And that's a very different experience. Because when they look back today, they don't just see what they lost, they see what you felt. Okay. And that's where this gets really heavy. I keep feeling this moment where they're mentally stepping into your shoes for the first time. Not imagining what happened to them, imagining what happened to you. Imagining what it felt like waiting for answers that never came. What it felt like hearing promises that weren't followed by action. What it felt like trying to understand someone who wouldn't let you all the way in. And honestly, I don't think they were fully prepared for what that realization would do to them. Because once empathy enters the room, excuses start leaving. The Three of Swords keeps lingering around this energy. Not as anger, not as punishment, more like awareness. A painful awareness. The kind that arrives when someone finally understands the weight of their choices. And I don't think they're proud of what they're seeing. In fact, I feel the opposite. I feel disappointment. I feel self-reflection. I feel somebody looking into the mirror and struggling with the image staring back at them. You know, there are moments in life when a person realizes they became the source of pain in a story they never wanted to damage. And that's the feeling I'm picking up here. Because I don't believe this person wakes up every day thinking they're a villain. I think they genuinely believe they were protecting themselves, protecting their fears, protecting their comfort, protecting whatever felt safe at the time. But safety has a cost, and they're beginning to understand what that cost was. The Five of Cups feels incredibly emotional because I keep seeing someone replaying old situations and noticing details they ignored before. Things you said, things you tried to communicate, the sadness hidden behind your strength. The moments when you were asking for understanding while trying not to ask for too much. And the more they revisit those memories, the more difficult it becomes to deny the impact they had on your heart. I almost feel like some of them are having conversations with themselves. Not conversations with you. Conversations with themselves. Questions they can't stop asking. Why did I shut down? Why did I push away someone who cared? Why did I keep waiting for a better time? Why did I make them carry so much alone? And for some of them, the answers aren't coming quickly. Because the truth is uncomfortable. The truth requires ownership. The truth requires looking at the parts of themselves they've spent years avoiding. Honestly, that's what makes this feel different from simple regret. Regret can stay on the surface. This feels deeper. This feels like somebody slowly realizing that the pain they were trying to avoid ended up becoming the pain they created. And once that realization settles in, something changes. Because blame starts disappearing. Defensiveness starts disappearing. The need to justify everything starts disappearing. What's left is accountability. Raw accountability. The kind that keeps a person awake when the world gets quiet. The kind that follows them into empty rooms. The kind that shows up during long drives and sleepless nights. And the more they sit with it, the more one particular thought keeps rising to the surface. Not what happened to me. Not why did this happen. But something much harder. Something much more honest. What if I was the reason they cried when nobody was around to see it? That question seems to follow them everywhere. Not because someone is forcing them to ask it. Because their own heart won't let them escape it anymore. And what I'm noticing here is that the energy starts becoming quieter, less reactive, less chaotic. Almost as if this person has stepped away from the noise for a while. The Hermit keeps appearing around them, and honestly, it doesn't feel lonely the way people assume it would. It feels necessary. Like somebody finally closed the door behind them and sat alone with their own thoughts. No distractions, no outside opinions. No one telling them what they should feel. Just silence. And for a person who spent a long time avoiding certain emotions, silence can be incredibly loud. Okay, I keep seeing them revisiting old wounds that have nothing to do with you at first. Things that happened years ago. Moments where they felt abandoned. Moments where they felt rejected. Moments where they learned that vulnerability was dangerous. Because here's the thing. The more they reflect on the connection with you, the more they start realizing that their reactions weren't created overnight. Some of those fears were already living inside them long before you arrived. You simply became the first person who got close enough to expose them. And honestly, that's a difficult realization, because it means they can't place the responsibility somewhere else anymore. They can't keep telling themselves that everyone leaves. They can't keep telling themselves that nobody understands them. Because part of them knows you tried. Part of them knows you were standing there, offering patience, understanding, and love while they were still fighting battles that existed long before they met you. The Four of Swords feels almost sacred here. Not dramatic, not explosive, just stillness. The kind of stillness that happens after emotional exhaustion. The kind of stillness that comes after crying when nobody is around. The kind of stillness where someone finally admits they're tired of carrying the same pain year after year. And I think that's exactly where they are. Tired. Tired of running. Tired of pretending. Tired of repeating the same patterns. Tired of hurting themselves. Tired of hurting people they care about. You know, some transformations don't happen because a person suddenly becomes strong. Some transformations happen because a person becomes exhausted by being the version of themselves they've always been. And that's what death feels like here. Not destruction, not punishment. More like an old identity slowly losing its grip. A version of themselves that was built around fear. A version of themselves that always expected disappointment. A version of themselves that pushed people away before they could get hurt. That version is beginning to crack. And honestly, I think it's scaring them. Because change sounds beautiful until it starts happening. Until you realize you can no longer think the way you used to think. You can no longer react the way you used to react. You can no longer hide behind the stories that once protected you. Something inside this person is shifting. Not perfectly, not overnight, but undeniably. I keep feeling moments where they catch themselves behaving differently, thinking differently, questioning things they never questioned before. And every time that happens, they seem surprised by it. Almost like they're meeting themselves for the first time. There's also grief attached to this. A lot of grief. Because growth often requires saying goodbye, not necessarily to people, sometimes to versions of ourselves. And I think they're mourning who they used to be. Not because they want that person back. Because they're finally seeing how much damage that version caused. How many opportunities it missed. How many walls it built. How many beautiful things it struggled to receive. The strange part is that the more this person changes, the more clearly they see the connection with you. Not through fantasy, not through longing, through honesty. And that honesty is beginning to reveal something uncomfortable. Because deep down, they're starting to understand that returning to you isn't simply about reaching out. It isn't simply about saying sorry. It isn't simply about reopening a conversation. The person who hurt you cannot be the same person standing at your door asking for another chance. And that realization seems to stop them cold. Because for the first time, they're asking themselves a question far more difficult than anything they've faced so far. What if becoming the person I should have been all along is the only apology that actually matters? That question seems to hit a nerve every time it surfaces. Because the more honest they become with themselves, the harder it is to ignore what still needs to change. And honestly, I don't feel like this is only about healing anymore. I feel like this is about release, about finally loosening the grip of things that have controlled them for far too long. The devil energy feels incredibly present here, but not in the way people often assume. What I'm seeing is attachment, patterns, habits, fear, the familiar comfort of staying exactly where they are, even when they know it isn't making them happy. You know, sometimes people become so accustomed to carrying a burden that they stop questioning why they're carrying it in the first place. And that's what I keep sensing around this person. There were situations they tolerated, behaviors they excused, versions of themselves they kept feeding because changing felt harder than staying stuck. But something is different now. Something inside them is pushing back. Okay, I keep getting the feeling that they can no longer pretend certain things are working. Relationships that once felt manageable suddenly feel draining. Conversations that once seemed normal suddenly feel hollow. Environments that once felt safe suddenly feel restrictive. It's almost as if their entire perspective is shifting. And when that happens, things start falling apart very quickly. The tower keeps showing up like a lightning strike. Not because life is punishing them, because life is exposing what was never stable to begin with. And honestly, I think that realization catches them off guard. Because there were things they genuinely believed would last forever. Ways of thinking they thought were protecting them. Walls they thought were keeping them safe. Only to realize those same walls were keeping love out, keeping truth out, keeping growth out. I keep hearing this phrase in my head. I can't keep doing this. Not directed at you, directed at themselves, directed at the version of their life that no longer fits. And that's a difficult place to be. Because once a person sees the truth, they can't unsee it. Once they recognize what is unhealthy, pretending becomes exhausting. Once they understand what they've been settling for, acceptance becomes impossible. I think courage is becoming a major theme here. Not loud courage, not dramatic courage, quiet courage. The kind that shows up when nobody is watching. The kind that asks difficult questions. The kind that sits alone and admits, this isn't who I want to be anymore. Strength feels incredibly powerful around this energy, not because they're suddenly fearless, because they're finally willing to feel the fear and keep moving anyway. And honestly, that's much harder. I think people underestimate how much bravery it takes to face yourself, to admit you've made mistakes, to admit you've been operating from wounds, to admit you've stayed connected to things that were slowly draining your spirit. This person is beginning to do exactly that. And the strange thing is, the more they let go of these old attachments, the clearer everything becomes. The confusion starts lifting. The excuses start fading. The noise starts quieting down. For the first time in a long time, they're seeing their life without all the filters. And what they see isn't always comfortable, because every attachment they release seems to reveal another truth underneath it. Another reason. Another layer. Another fear they never dealt with. You know, growth rarely looks graceful while it's happening. Sometimes it looks messy. Sometimes it looks like uncertainty. Sometimes it looks like watching entire parts of your life collapse, while trying to trust that something healthier can eventually take its place. And I feel like that's exactly where they are, standing between the old version of themselves and the person they're trying to become. One foot in the past, one foot moving towards something different, but there is one particular fear they haven't fully conquered yet, one final piece of resistance still holding on. Because as much as they're changing, as much as they're releasing, as much as they're waking up, a question keeps surfacing every time they think about you. What if I finally become the person I needed to be, and they're no longer waiting for me to get there? That thought seems to linger much longer than they want it to. Not because they doubt what they feel, because they're finally realizing how much time was spent holding those feelings back. And honestly, I think that's where the energy begins to soften. The fear is still there. The uncertainty is still there. But something else is starting to emerge underneath it. Honesty. Raw, uncomfortable honesty. Ace of Swords feels incredibly clear here because I don't see this person hiding behind old narratives anymore. I don't see them telling themselves stories that help them avoid responsibility. I see someone becoming exhausted by secrets, exhausted by avoidance, exhausted by carrying conversations inside their head that never made it out of their mouth. You know, some people spend so much time protecting themselves from vulnerability that they don't realize how lonely it becomes. And I think this person is finally feeling that loneliness. Not because they're alone, because they haven't allowed themselves to be fully seen. There are things they've wanted to tell you for a very long time. Things they've rehearsed over and over. Explanations, confessions, apologies. Not perfect speeches, not polished words, just truth. The kind of truth that makes your voice shake when you say it. Okay, I keep seeing them imagining a conversation with you, not a fantasy, not some unrealistic reunion. Just two people sitting across from each other without walls between them. And honestly, I think that idea scares them almost as much as it comforts them. Because once the truth is spoken, there is no hiding behind misunderstandings anymore. There is no pretending. There is no escape route. There is only authenticity. The Page of Cups feels incredibly vulnerable, almost innocent. Because underneath all the regret and all the reflection, I think there is a part of them that simply wants to be understood. Not excused, not rescued, understood. They want you to know what was happening inside them when they made certain choices. Not because they're trying to justify those choices, because they're trying to explain what they never had the emotional maturity to express back then. And honestly, I feel like some of those explanations surprise even them. The more they dig beneath the surface, the more they realize how many decisions were driven by fear, fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of not being enough, fear of being loved and then losing it. It's strange because what looked like confidence from the outside often came from insecurity on the inside. What looked like distance was sometimes self-protection. What looked like indifference was sometimes emotional overwhelm. And the realization of that is creating a lot of emotion. I keep hearing this energy of, I should have told you. Not once, repeatedly. I should have told you how scared I was. I should have told you what I was struggling with. I should have told you what was really happening. Because silence ended up creating wounds that honesty might have prevented. There is also a sincere apology sitting in this energy. Not the kind that asks for something in return. Not the kind that tries to erase the past. A genuine apology. One that begins with accountability instead of excuses. One that understands pain cannot simply be undone. And honestly, I think that's why this feels so emotional. Because they're no longer approaching the situation from their own perspective alone. They're They're starting to consider yours. They're starting to understand that apologies are not about easing their guilt. They're about acknowledging someone else's hurt. King of Cups feels very different from where this person started. More grounded, more emotionally aware, more willing to sit with difficult feelings instead of running from them. And that growth isn't happening because life became easier. It's happening because they've finally stopped fighting what their heart has been trying to tell them. The more they listen, the clearer everything becomes. The feelings, the regret, the love, the things left unsaid. And that's creating a moment they've been avoiding for a very long time. Because there is one truth sitting at the center of all of this. One truth they can no longer push aside no matter how hard they try. A truth that becomes impossible to ignore every time your memory crosses their mind. The truth that what they lost wasn't simply a relationship. It was someone they genuinely believed would still understand them after hearing everything they've been afraid to say. That realization seems to stay with them long after the moment passes. Not because it's comfortable, because it feels real. And honestly, that's what makes this energy so different from everything that came before. For a long time, their focus was on what went wrong, the mistakes, the regrets, the distance, the loss. But something is slowly beginning to shift. The star keeps appearing like a quiet light in the background, not demanding attention, not forcing anything, just reminding them that even after disappointment, hope still exists. And I think that's surprising them, because there was a period where this person genuinely believed some things could never be repaired. Some wounds were too deep. Some words couldn't be taken back. Some opportunities had disappeared forever. Yet the more they grow, the more they begin to understand something important. Healing doesn't erase the past. It changes the way people carry it. Okay, I keep feeling this person becoming less focused on fixing everything overnight, and more focused on becoming someone capable of building something healthier. That's a huge difference, because desperation often wants immediate results. Growth understands that trust takes time. And honestly, I think they're learning that lesson now. The temperance energy feels incredibly mature, not dramatic, not rushed, just patient, balanced, intentional. Almost like somebody realizing that love isn't only about emotion, it's also about consistency. It's also about showing up. It's also about creating safety instead of uncertainty. You know, I think there was a time when this person believed feelings alone would be enough. If they cared deeply enough, if they loved strongly enough, if the connection was meaningful enough, everything else would somehow work itself out. But life has taught them something different. Feelings matter, but actions matter too. Trust matters, communication matters, emotional availability matters. And that's exactly what they're beginning to work on. Not because somebody forced them to, because they finally understand the value of those things. There's also a softer energy coming through, a tenderness I haven't felt before. Almost like they're allowing themselves to imagine peace again. Not fantasy, not obsession, peace, the kind that comes from honesty. The kind that comes from mutual understanding. The kind that comes from two people no longer fighting themselves. Two of Cups feels incredibly heartfelt here. Because every time I connect with this energy, I don't feel control. I don't feel possession. I don't feel fear. I feel appreciation. I feel someone recognizing what made this connection different in the first place. The emotional safety, the understanding, the feeling of being seen. And honestly, I think they're realizing how rare that truly is. Life has a way of teaching people the value of something after it's gone. Not as punishment, just perspective. And perspective seems to be arriving in waves for this person. Little moments where everything suddenly makes sense. Little moments where they understand what you were trying to communicate. Little moments where they recognize how much love existed beneath things they once overlooked. And every one of those moments seems to strengthen their desire to do better. Not perfect, better. That's the word I keep hearing. Better. A better communicator, a better partner, a better version of themselves. Because the truth is, they don't want to return carrying the same emotional baggage that created distance before. They don't want to rebuild something only to repeat the same cycle. They want to approach this differently, more honestly, more consciously, more intentionally. And honestly, that takes courage, because hope can feel risky after disappointment. Vulnerability can feel risky after loss. Opening your heart again can feel risky after regret. Yet despite all of that, hope keeps showing up, quietly, consistently, refusing to disappear. Almost like a small voice inside them saying that some connections are worth treating with greater care than they did before. And the more they listen to that voice, the more one image keeps returning. Not an apology, not a dramatic conversation, not even a reunion, just a simple moment. Two people sitting across from one another. No walls, no masks, no running, no hiding, just honesty. And every time that image appears, their heart seems to ask the same question. What could happen if, for once, we both met each other exactly as we are? You know, sometimes the biggest transformations happen quietly, not when anyone is watching, not when anyone is applauding. Just a heart learning how to be honest, a soul learning how to let go of fear, and a person learning how to love in a healthier way than they did before. Whatever is unfolding in this connection, I hope this reading brought you a little clarity, a little comfort, and maybe even a little peace. Thank you for being here and sharing this moment with me. I appreciate every single one of you more than you know. Take care of your heart, trust yourself, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye for now.